Good evening, everybody. This is Gene from NYC, and I'm back with another video. It's almost 10 p.m. here in New York City. So, I first would like to as always, I should say, greet the subscribers, whether you've been here from day one or you just subscribed. Welcome to the channel. I hope you enjoy it. Excuse me. I hope you continue to enjoy the content. So I wanted to briefly discuss my thoughts on the casting of, I believe her name is Halle Bailey, as Ariel in the live action version of The Little Mermaid. Believe it or not, I'm actually not upset by this. Many people have been online. I've seen a few videos where they're decrying this casting, and I actually am not upset. And let me explain why I'm upset. First of all, let me explain. I don't necessarily agree with the casting, right? I have nothing against her, but again, visually speaking, she doesn't look the part, right? It's just obvious, right? Ariel has a certain look to her, and this young girl, and I have no doubt she's talented, doesn't fit that look. But the reason why I am not upset by this change is because it's something at this point that I expect from Disney, right? I actually did some reading. I've read a few more articles, and I'll link to them in the description, where they were going into the other characters and the other changes that were being made. And so, for example, Scuttle, right, the seagull, who is typically male, not typically, he is male, in the animated film, is now going to be played by an actress named, or at least she calls herself Awkwafina, right? And in addition to that, apparently Lin-Manuel Miranda, who's most famous for musicals such as In the Heights, Hamilton, in Disney, he did a song, at least one song. He may have done more, but he did one song for the film Moana. That is You're Welcome. That was the one sung by The Rock for his character of Maui. So apparently Lin is going to be doing a remake, revamped version of Poor Unfortunate Souls. And given that Mr. Miranda's style is more hip-hop, it involves a lot of rapping. If you've ever listened to any of the songs from Hamilton, you know there's a lot of rapping. So I think given all these changes, and these are just the ones that we've heard about, I think it's fair to say at this point that this live action version of The Little Mermaid is not a remake, right? It's a reboot. They are not trying to take the 1989 version and sort of bring it to life with live action actors. They are trying to recast and reboot it. I think that, again, given these changes, and no doubt many more changes to come, that this film will be The Little Mermaid in name only. So if you're a big fan of The Little Mermaid, if The Little Mermaid for you is your Disney film, that is the Disney film, if you love that film the way I love Beauty and the Beast, then just keep that in mind, right? As you hear about these changes, and when it comes out, if you're considering whether or not to go see it, just understand that this is not the 1989 version starring real life people. This is the current year reboot version. And that is why I am not upset. Because I've come, I guess, maybe I've just become jaded or apathetic, but I've come to accept that this is what Disney's doing. They are just rebooting and recasting the 90s Renaissance period of films. They don't care what these films mean to people like myself, to the 90s kids, to the 80s babies, to the late and mid 80s, and of course people who are older, right? It isn't just people my age who are in their sort of their mid 30s at this point. There are people who are younger, there are people who are older. That these films mean something to them. Disney doesn't care about what these films mean to the original fan base, to the original generation or generations that saw it. All they care about is getting woke points, is getting positive attention from the mainstream. And since what's currently popular in the mainstream, I should say, is to recast and reboot, then that's what they're going to do. If it's in vogue, if it's in style to arbitrarily recast and race flip a character from white to any other ethnicity, then that's what they're going to do. And that's why I'm not upset. Believe it or not, as much as I personally don't agree with Disney's approach to this, I do hope that this girl, that Miss Bailey, does well. I don't want her to fail. Right? This is the biggest role of her very young career, and I hope that she does a good job. So, all that being said, I also want to get into why I think Disney did this. Why Disney specifically went with an African American actress. And the reason, and this may sound like a bit of a conspiracy theory, but I've actually given this a lot of thought. So, hear me out, right? It's kind of like the old George Michael album, Listen Without Prejudice. So, hear me out. I think the reason why Disney in particular went with an African American actress, I don't think they were ever going to look for a white actress or any other ethnicity. I think for this role at least, they definitely had an African American actress in mind. I don't think they were going to cast for anything else. And the reason I feel this way, the reason I see it this way is actually because of a Disney film that came out about 10 years ago now. The Princess and the Frog. While The Princess and the Frog was, for all intents and purposes, a good film, it was critically acclaimed, I think it was up for an Academy Award, it was a financial success. It had a budget of $105 million, I believe, and it made back over $250 million. So it certainly made its budget back. You can't say it was a financial failure. But what the film did not do, right, and this is nobody's fault, but what the film didn't do is become this big, colossal, instant, what's what I'm looking for? Instant classic, like a good chunk of the 90s Renaissance films did. If you compare the box office numbers, for example, if you look at Beauty and the Beast, that made over $400 million in the theater. Aladdin made a little over $500 million in theaters. Even Hunchback of Notre Dame, which was sort of the Princess and the Frog of the mid '90s, being that film that did well but didn't do well enough to Disney standards. That film, while it had a budget of $100 million, I believe, but in theaters it actually made back $325 million, I believe I read on the Wikipedia page. Again, I'll link all this in the description. Right? When it comes to box office numbers, box office returns, the only film that, at least of the ones that I looked up, I didn't look up every Disney Renaissance film, but of the ones I looked up, the only film that The Princess and the Frog actually had a better box office is actually The Little Mermaid. The Little Mermaid only made a little over $230 think it was 30 or 33 million dollars in the box office back in 1989. Difference is, however, that The Little Mermaid only had a budget of 40 million, right? So all these things are relative. In fact, with the exception of Hunchback, all the films that I listed, with the exception of Hunchback and Princess and the Frog, they all had budgets well under $50 million. In fact, Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin had budgets both under 30 million. So when you compare that, right, a film takes, let's say 25 million to make, and then it makes back, over 500 million. That's a big haul. That's a huge profit. That is going to be much more profit than a film that had a $100 million budget and made over $250 million. Right? It's just that those films became instant classics, and Princess and the Frog, while good, just didn't hit that verified air. It didn't make as much money. Tiana did not become as iconic a princess. Right? It just did good, but not good enough by Disney standards. And what happened at the time is that because of the, I don't want to say failure, but I guess not living up to Disney standards, Disney decided at that point to fully move away from 2D animation. And that's why films that came after Princess and the Frog, such as Brave, such as Frozen, such as, Brave, Frozen, there's one missing, I know, I just can't think of it. Brave, Frozen, Tangled, that's the one I was thinking of. Zootopia. All those films were fully in 3D after that. And the Princess and the Frog is the reason why. So you may be wondering, well, Gene, this is a nice story, nice summary, but what does this got to do with The Little Mermaid? Let me tell you what I believe this has to do with The Little Mermaid. Right? Disney has been dogged for years by people for not having strong African American representation. And while they now technically do have an African American princess because of Princess and the Frog, again, Tiana is not as iconic as Belle, as Jasmine, as Ariel, as the other Disney princesses. Again, she's kind of like Esmeralda, right? She exists. Some people know about her. Some people like her. But again, she didn't hit that verified air. She didn't become iconic. Disney wants iconic. They don't settle for anything less at this point, especially with their Disney princess line. So here's what I think. Now that I've given all of this backstory, here's what I think. I think that, as I was stating earlier, Disney, as I was saying, has always been dogged, has always been criticized for their African American representation. To this day, people who don't like Disney and like to criticize Disney will bring up films such as Song of the South and other films that made it in the 30s and the 40s, which used, what's the word I'm looking for, racist depictions of African Americans. And again, Tiana not becoming this iconic character wasn't enough. So what can they do, right? Well, they can't replace any of the other ethnic princesses, right? They can't take away the only Chinese warrior. They can't take away the only Native American princess. That is not Tiger Lily. Right? They can't take away the only Arab princess. So what do? They figure, well, we have several white or white-looking princesses. Ariel in particular, right? The Little Mermaid is the film that kick-started what came to be known as the Disney Renaissance. Let's just race flip her, right? Because then they get the best of both worlds. right? They get their African American princess, but she's not an original character, so they don't have to work to give her her own personality, to make her likable and make her original on her own merits. They can just take an established name, an established character, right? Give her some light brown skin and say, hey, this is our new version of Ariel. And what happens? The established, ingrown popularity is there. People know who the character is. They don't have to work to build her up, and they get their African American, their positive African American representation. And it's already paying off, because guess what? This is being praised all over the place. And anybody who disagrees with it is being called ignorant or racist or this or that. I know, because I've been in Facebook conversations about this, and even when I present respectful, thought out arguments like, well, a mermaid is half human, half fish. If she's deep underwater, wouldn't that kind of make her pale or paler? I get called all these nasty names. And then I get very mean and sarcastic, because you know what, I just can't put up with that BS but so much. But anyway, that's another rant for another day. And in addition, right, I think that this young girl was cast because if you look at her skin tone, and I want to be clear, I'm not criticizing her. I have nothing against her. I'm just going with what I see. I think Disney knew that they were going to run into some criticism about the race swap. So I think they basically engaged in a case of, but not too black. And they casted a young actress, who can sing, who's up and coming, but who's also, especially for African Americans, right, is very light skinned. She's only a shader. If you look at her and you look at a picture of Ariel from Little Mermaid, you'll see that she's only maybe the actress, she's only a shade or two darker than Ariel is, right? She's not too far off skin tone wise. So I think that's also a factor in why this young girl was cast. So, to make a long story short, I think Disney was basically trying to have their cake and eat it too by casting a light-skinned African-American actress and singer as Ariel from The Little Mermaid. Now again, I hope she does well. I wish her no ill will. But given all these changes, this is not The Little Mermaid. It's a current year remake. It's a current year reboot. And if you plan to see it when it comes out, just keep that in mind. It's not the 1989 film that you grew up with, right? Disney is lying to you. Disney is lying to all of us when they advertise these films as the beloved classic you grew up with, but now with live actors. Right, they do that so they'll draw you in. They play on your love and nostalgia, right, on you wanting to experience your childhood one more time, and then they make all these changes to the characters, whether it's a race flip, whether it's a gender flip, whether it's a change in characterization. They make all these changes, and now you don't recognize these characters, right? You don't recognize Jasmine, you don't recognize Belle, you don't recognize Ariel. Not because the original character is a problem, but because Disney has decided, well, we need to make new ones, right, that are now socially acceptable. And this is how they do it. They use their live action line to redo these characters to appease the mainstream. So again, just keep that in mind. If you want to go see it when it comes out, go ahead. I hope you enjoy it. Just keep these issues in mind when you're asking yourself why it feels almost nothing like the original film. That's because it essentially is nothing like the original film. And interestingly enough, all this, especially now knowing that the song that Poor Unfortunate Souls will probably be a rap, I would expect it would probably be something similar to the remix of the song from the show Descendants, where they had Ursula's daughter singing the song, so it has a much more hip hop rap feel. So whoever is cast in the role of Ursula, whether it be Melissa McCarthy or some other actress, I hope they're a decent rapper, because rapping can be a difficult musical styling in its own right. Saying these words and saying them fast and saying them, with a certain pace and a certain staccato, I guess you could say, ain't easy. I mean, I'm a rock fan, but I still stutter over Stone Cold Crazy, because the lyrics are just incredibly quick. It's incredibly difficult to actually keep up with that song, and that's not even a proper rap song. So, given that, right, I struggle to keep up with that. So I can't imagine again someone who is not, a trained rapper, basically. But we'll see what happens. So those are my thoughts on this casting of this young girl of Miss I think her name is Halle Bailey, or Halle Bailey. Sounds like Halle Berry. As Ariel. I'm not upset by it. I can't say I agree with it. Overall, this film is a reboot, not a remake. And I worry for whoever has to play Ursula now, if they have to rap. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good day and night, everybody. Bye-bye.